my fundamental thing about DevOps is everything except writing those Java or .java.net or whatever, those files, right? I mean, everything around that happens, that's where DevOps fit in. No matter how much you prepare, no matter how much automation you have in place, there will always be those landmines sitting somewhere which you are going to kind of stamp upon, right? So you always have to be prepared and be ready to face those challenges in the DevOps world. After all, what is your goal? Your goal is to make sure your job is done. Like whatever is the requirement of that particular function, that is done. Tool is kind of secondary to that problem. It's just a means to solve the problem, right? So if you can write a shell script or if you can write some Python script and do something, I'd rather do that. Fix the problem there. And then move it to some tool. If it's about CI/CD, move it to Jenkins or GitHub Actions or something. If it's about how to deploy your application, so do I use Kubernetes? Do I just use plain ECS? Or do I just go serverless? Whichever tool solves it at the minimal level of complexity, I'll go for that. What happens is, like, if you have read something and it seems cool, right, you tend to stretch your use case to fit the tool's requirement. The other way around, right? Whereas you should be looking at your use case and which tool will solve the problem. So once you get hung up on tool, it's like you are a person with a hammer and every problem is a nail. So you just go beating on each nail in the same fashion. So
welcome to our ongoing series, Practitioner of DevOps. In this series, we talk to in-the-field DevOps practitioners and get to know what they really do. We talk about how they got started in DevOps and how their career has evolved over the last number of years. So fasten your seatbelts and get ready to hear from some in-the-trenches stories from folks who are killing it at DevOps today. Today's guest is Kamlesh Mutha. He's the Director and India Service Operations and DevOps at NetSPI. Kamlesh and I go back all the way to 2003 when we joined Siemens in the tools support team. Since then, I've seen Kamlesh grow technically stronger every single year, and especially now in the container ecosystem and security space. These days, he's leading the DevOps direction for a full suite of offensive security services through a penetration testing as a service platform with NetSpy. He's also held strategic roles in defining DevOps practices at iSight and FireEye. He's one guy who's all things security, container, and it literally sits on the cloud. So sit back for a fun, very technical, and very interesting conversation. Without further ado, let's head over to Kamlesh. Hello, Kamlesh. How are you doing?
hey, Savinder, hi. I'm good. How about you?
Good, man. And I'm so happy to see you on this podcast. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. Thank you.
I know you're more of a behind the camera guy, and I do appreciate you coming outside of your comfort zone to do this podcast. And I know you're doing it because you care about giving back to the community, right? We've spent long enough in this area, and now we've reached a certain stage where we know a thing or two. And now through this podcast, the goal is to be able to share with the world of the little nuggets that we have picked up. So I really appreciate you, Kamlesh, coming here today on this podcast and sharing your valuable knowledge.
Thank you, Savinder. And I must tell you, only you could do it. Only you could get me out.
I know, man. I know. It hasn't been easy. But yeah, here we are.
So really looking forward. Let's see.
Yeah, sure. So let's start from where you are today, and then we'll talk about your journey as well. So at present, your role is Director, India Service Operations and DevOps at NetSpy.
That's
right?
Yeah.
So
that's right.
Can you explain in plain English to a 5-year-old what does this mean? It's a complicated title. What the heck do you do?
Well, complicated is just because it involves multiple responsibilities, but
Uh-huh.
like as the name goes, so one of the primary responsibility is to lead DevOps operations for NetSPI across India and US offices. So we have a small DevOps team which takes care of all the DevOps operations that we do, like managing production deployments, CI/CD setups, etc. And in addition to that, the another part is services operations. So we basically have an SE consultant team sitting here in Pune. So I help them out with the operation side of the team, not so much in the engagement side, but from the operational perspective. And plus, I also kind of work with local IT teams to look after our local infrastructure, etc. So that's why the title is big, because in a sense it involves multiple roles as well. But primary
Correct.
role,
Correct.
as you would guess, is still DevOps, managing DevOps operations.
Okay, so can you break this down a little bit? What does DevOps, managing DevOps operation, what does it actually mean on the ground?
It involves looking after everything except the coding part, which developers do themselves, right? So, for example,
Okay.
we like you use GitHub for yeah, active development, so that's where the developers push source code. So you pick that source code up and build it, then deploy it to some non-production environment, then you deploy it to production environments. In between, you also run some tests and everything. So those are like little parts of the DevOps, and that's exactly the blocks which our team goes and helps engineering team with. So CI/CD,
Okay.
then deployment, then managing production environments, their maintenance, their like periodic deployments to those environments, etc. So all of those are the activities that we primarily own.
Okay, so your team is responsible for production as well as non-prod environments, both, right?
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So it's not, DevOps is not just CI/CD then, right? It's a lot of other things.
Lot of other things. Lot of
Okay. Okay,
yeah.
cool. Yeah, we'll dig a little deeper as we go along.
Right. So my fundamental thing about DevOps is everything except writing those Java or .java.net or whatever those files, right? I mean, everything around that happens. That's where DevOps fit in.
Wow, I like that. Everything other than writing application code. Application code, right?
Yep.
Right, because your environments today are also codified in certain ways, so that is also code, right?
That is code, but that's not a per se application code, but yeah.
Application code, correct.
Yeah, correct.
So you're saying everything outside of other than application code in some shape or form is touched by DevOps.
Absolutely. Yep.
Perfect. I love that definition. Really good. So, so like you said, right, there are various facets of your role. There are multiple hats that you wear, at any given time. So tell us some interesting examples, maybe from this role or from previous roles where, it was very challenging, where shit hit the ceiling and you had to do something crazy. Give us some interesting tidbits.
Oh. So it's always so difficult to kind of remember one particular instance or something.
Yeah.
But in general, like from my past experience, what I've observed is like, so no matter how careful you are, no matter how prepared you are, you will hit some obstacle somewhere. I mean, Mr. Murphy works very closely with DevOps, that's for sure. So, if you ask me about incidents, so I can tell one. So, of course, without naming the technologies or anything as such, but
Sure.
so we, so we use, for example, we use Ansible for configuration management. Now we use it for all the like software configurations. So in one of our products, we use a firewall appliance, and so it kind of controls the access to your application. Okay. Now.
Okay. So, if I can interrupt
Yeah.
you, if you can explain the role of Ansible in this also, what exactly is Ansible doing for people who might not be familiar with Ansible? Just one or two lines on that.
So, sure. So Ansible basically falls under the category of configuration management. Now, what is configuration management? So you take any Linux box, for example, and on that Linux box you want to install any software, or basically you want to make sure you have installed Apache, you have installed I don't know, maybe like some logger or something like. Let's say you have to install. Make sure that you have to install 5 applications on that particular server. One way you
Some
can
prerequisite.
some
Something.
prerequisites. So
Yeah.
one way to do that would be you manually go log into that machine and do some yum install or something, and you will install the software. But then that is not reproducible on hundreds of machines if you want to do it. So in that place, I mean, to solve that problem, you use tools like Ansible. So it is very repeatable. Whatever changes you are making, you are tracking those changes through code, right? And that's why, I mean, there are some other tools as well, but Ansible is the primer, what do you say, like de facto tool today to use for configuration management. Now in this particular instance where what I was talking about, so we use Ansible to configure that firewall rules, everything, but there were certain constraints because of which we could not automate set of rules, maybe a couple of rules. They had to be done manually. But without that, like, and we wanted to upgrade our firewalls appliances. So they were third-party appliances, not our own. So we did that, like we made Ansible changes, we updated them on non-prod environments. Everything was fine. And on the day, then we are so well confident that okay, now we have tested everything. So like followed all the DevOps practice and everything, and now let's go and do it on production. You upgrade it, and boom, you're down. Your application is not reachable on anything. Then the panic spreads, right? Like then because it's your application that is down, the entire world is using that application. So then we did some debugging and eventually found out that there was one particular policy whose default state earlier was something else, and in this version that has changed to something else. So earlier it was allowing access through that rule, but now it doesn't allow, and that's why your application access was blocked. So eventually we figured it out and managed to fix it, like get around it, and application was up and running and everything. That's fine. So kudos to our team of configuring that out. But the point I'm trying to convey is, so no matter how much you prepare, no matter how much automation you have in place, there will always be those landmines sitting somewhere which you are going to kind of stamp upon, right? So you always have to be prepared and be ready to like face those challenges in the DevOps world. So that's how I would put the challenges as such. I mean, for this role.
Yeah, brilliant. And I want to dig a little deeper here, right? So I'm sure instances like this, whether on production or non-production environments of different shape and sizes, keep happening because that is life, right? Shit will happen all the time, right?
Exactly.
So I want to dig a little deeper into your thought process here. What happens, what goes on in your mind when something like this happens, and how do you deal with it? Because externally you have to present a calm thing, internally, could be scared, different emotions might happen. But to the team, to the customer, you have to come out as Mr. Cool who knows everything around and who hopefully knows what's happening. So how do you maintain that? How do you do that?
So that's a good expectation, but I'm really not sure if I myself would follow that.
Sure.
Like after all, it's a panic situation. I try to maintain the calm and composure, but after all, I'm human, and the most of it. So I find it difficult, but then so like. After your initial moments of frustration, like, oh, why now? Why this has to fail now? And like stuff, then you actually get down to solving the problem, to understand the problem, to solve it, and that's where then you have to run in multiple directions. Like, oh, did it fail on non-production environments as well? Did we make any changes? Look at all of those changes, etc., and get into that debugging mode. So, and after all, like once you have debugged it, like applied some mandate on to fix it for now and then apply permanent fix, then then things will calm down. But yeah, so to answer your question, maybe I'm still not sure if I meet those expectations.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, understood. But I think
Yeah.
you've touched upon some very important points. That is that based on your understanding of the landscape,
Yep.
you try and narrow down on what the root cause potentially could be, eliminating things one by one.
Yep.
And because if it's production down, your number one goal is do whatever it takes, but get the system up. Right? So whatever banded it takes, get it up and then figure out the rest.
Yep.
Right? That's
Yep.
that's what the approach is. Yeah, makes
Right,
sense.
right.
Now, I want to, talk a little bit about this more because today in the DevOps area, you could be, dealing with 50, 100, 200 tools in the entire landscape. Everything from legacy systems to the middlewares to, the Kubernetes to serverless and God knows what else. Right? And things keep changing very fast. Some team is now decided to do data lakes on Azure, somebody is doing something on GCP, stuff is happening all the time. So as a person who's responsible for the DevOps operation and in general, putting automation behind all of these technologies, how do you keep up to date with all the stuff that's going around?
So that's really difficult. First of all,
Yes.
like every other week you will have new buzzword coming up, and it seems important, and you need to catch up on that and everything. Like it feels compelling to catch up with it, etc. Philosophically, I always like tools which are simpler, which are like kind of have easy to manage. After all, what is your goal? Your goal is to make sure your job is done. Like whatever is
Yep.
the requirement of that particular function, that is done. Tool is kind of secondary to that problem. It's just a means to solve the problem, right? So, as far as possible, I'd rather keep it in, like, for example, if you write a shell script or if you write some Python script and do something, I'd rather do that. Fix the problem there, and then move it to some tool. Maybe like if it's about CI/CD, move it to Jenkins or GitHub Actions or something. If it's about how to deploy your application, so do I use EC Kubernetes? Do I just use plain ECS, or do I just go serverless? I'll look at the nature of the problem that I'm trying to solve. Whichever tool solves it at the minimal level of complexity, I'll go for that one. So, like, just because I want to host a containerized application, I'll directly go to Kubernetes. Sorry, I'm not going to do that. Though Kubernetes is like very cool and like techy, etc. But I have my reservations around it. So that's my general approach about it.
No, perfect. I love this because you're not jumping onto the latest bandwagon out there. You're trying to keep things as simple as possible and only adopt if it's really required. And that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, complete sense.
Yeah, right. At least to me.
No, that makes sense. Absolutely. So I think a subtle message that what you're also trying to convey is that while it's okay to be well read about everything that's happening, you don't have to necessarily adopt everything that's going on because it might not be valid to your use case also.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, like, if you have read something and it seems cool, right, you tend to stretch your use case to fit the tool's requirement. The other way around, right? Whereas you should be looking at your use case and which tool will solve the problem. So once you get hung up on tool, it's like you are a person with a hammer, and every problem is a nail. So you just go beating on each nail in the same fashion. So focus on the problem and not on the tools.
I didn't know about this philosophical side of Kamlesh, a hammer, nail and all that. Good stuff, man. Well done. Well done.
So it's also a part of a job, right?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your journey now, right? You worked in product companies of various shapes and sizes, and then you've worked in startup-ish companies also.
Yep.
Right? So, I know it's a very loaded question, but if you can just break it down, product companies versus smaller setups or services, right? What's the difference? if you could just create a small table with 2-3 bullet points each, just for somebody maybe who's weighing on that, or he's worked in one side and not the other, how do you compare?
Right. So for smaller companies, so all the smaller companies that I have worked for, they all have been product companies anyways. So for classification, we can keep like services company and product companies as such.
Sure.
For the differentiation part.
Yeah.
So the primary difference that I find between services team working in a services company wherein you are serving a particular client as against to working in the product environment setup, right? So the most important difference between the two is ownership. So ownership in the sense, so you get to define the process. First of all, you see the problem in front of you. It's not being told by somebody else to you that this is my problem, now go and solve it. In product company, because everything is happening in front of you, you see where people are struggling, and accordingly you can define your processes to be it a CI/CD pipeline, be it a deployment cycle, or define how the environment should look like. How do you set up your production, non-production environment, etc. All of that, whatever falls under DevOps. In services side, what happens is, okay, I have defined my product and everything. I want a CI/CD pipeline to be done, so please configure the Jenkins pipeline for me. So your scope becomes very limited.
Okay.
Now, even in that scope, it again depends on the person. Someone might be very happy saying, okay, I've got to create a Jenkins pipeline. I'll do that. Customer is happy, I am happy. The world is great place. World is great place to live in. But then, what the disadvantage of that approach is, your exposure remains very limited, and your precious time is kind of getting wasted if you are not learning it during that cycle, because you are only focused on tickets, and you are just doing what is asked of you. Now, if you are at a similar level in terms of number of years of experience, and if you are in the product company, if you are curious enough, you will see 10 other problems around your area. You will go discuss with people, try to understand at least, and you may be able to provide solutions as well. And that's where you are actively participating in the actual product development and delivering it to customers. So that's how I look at it. And that's where I think the fundamental challenge thing here is that you get to grow your career faster in the product setup, because you are dealing in so many areas. You have so much exposure. So you can really grow out of it. And one other thing I would just like to highlight is, in services company, if you are kind of working on multiple projects, you definitely get the breadth of the field. So you get to work on a lot of different projects. Oh, yesterday I was building Java project. Today I am building C++ project. So it's a different ball game altogether. So that's the good part of it. But then you kind of have to grasp it, and use it to some extent, and not just look at it as one ticket that is closed.
Sure. So basically, you're saying it's depth versus width.
Primarily, yes. Yeah.
Primarily, yeah. Okay, yeah. Fair enough. Now let's spend a little bit more time in this.
Sure.
So let's say I'm a listener to this podcast, and today I work in a services company.
Sure.
Right? Now, obviously, you're not telling me go and change it. Your life is bad. That's not what you're saying.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So, what can I do staying within the organization to get more exposure, to add to my knowledge? What are the 2 or 3 things that logically make sense in that environment?
I completely agree. So I'm not saying you change your job right now and move it to product company or something like that.
Listen to the podcast first, then you change it.
Right. I hope not. Yeah. Okay. So what I meant probably was, so you have to realize in which environment you are working in. So if you are in product environment, everything is in front of you. You don't have to take any extra effort, or you may have to, but not so much, to understand the end-to-end situation, end-to-end cycles or pipelines that they have set up, etc. But when you are working in services company, if your exposure is limited because you're offsite, you're offsite,
Yeah.
everything is happening on site, and you're not aware of how the situation is. At least try and spend some effort, time and effort to figure out what exactly are they trying to do. It's remote, so it's going to be difficult, but then those extra efforts will be required to understand it fully rather than just looking at the question that they have asked. Okay, how can I do this? So maybe you can go back and ask three different questions. Okay, what are you doing now? How are you solving this problem now? How critical that problem is, and based on that, you may figure out few more things which will help you to expand on your technical know-how, and
Sure.
which will build your profile going forward. So it's
Sure. I
not
think
good or
so.
bad.
Yeah.
It's not good or bad, but it's more about you realize which environment you are working in and how you can grow your technical expertise in your situation.
Correct. I think it's about understanding your constraints and
Yep,
then working through them on whatever you can do possible. But one
absolutely.
thing which you have said in both cases is uh, the core DNA of a DevOps engineer, which is to ask questions and to be curious. You
Absolutely.
know, why
Absolutely.
is this happening? Why am I doing this? What else can I do? How can I make life better? I think that's the core DNA which you have touched upon.
Right.
And within, I'm sure if even if you are in a services company, even if you are at offsite with, majority of the team at onsite, nobody will let go of a good suggestion, right?
Absolutely
If
not.
you say that, hey, we've been doing it this way, I figured out this smart script of doing it, or I've automated this thing, everybody will appreciate it.
Absolutely. Everybody will.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Okay.
no matter who that person is or what position or anything. So people are
Yeah, yeah,
always
absolutely.
welcome. See, at the end of it, everybody wants to make their own life easier. So,
Correct.
and if you're helping them do that, I mean, like, there can be no better thing to do, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah, correct.
yeah, so I think that's very important, I would say.
Sure. So we've spoken about services and product. Now let's talk a little bit about the established big big organizations versus working for a startup-ish kind of thing. Right? So you've done that as well.
Yep.
So tell us about the thought process of if you're working in a large enterprise, the IBMs of the world, something that huge, which is stable, at least the organization itself is not going anywhere. Your group and all that, stuff keeps happening, but you're sure of the sanity of the organization. From there, what thought process does it take to jump into a startup-ish role? And how do you weigh the pros and cons of that decision? Talk to us about your thought process.
Okay. So that's actually a very interesting question, and like, no, for two reasons. So, I mean,
Okay.
I've been very lucky in my career. I would say, like, I've got opportunity to work with startup companies on two different locations, and startup in the sense like real startup. Like, I mean, in one of the companies, my employee ID number was 4, and that too at the very
Wow.
beginning of my career. So,
Wow.
so now, so okay, so I will have to be honest also. So that was just an accident. So that was my very first IT company where I joined in as a developer. But
Fair enough.
we
But
like,
still.
right. So there were only 4 of us, and now new people were joining. Somebody had to set up the system, right? Somebody had to purchase a computer, put it on the table, connect the network cable to it, and bring it online and let that developer work. So
Right.
I happen to take that role. I mean, and I mean, continue doing that, and that's how I became system admin, and then that got into the DevOps side. What I'm trying to say here is, so if you are, I mean, apart from how the company is doing and the business part, etc. So forgetting that, but purely about if I want to join as a DevOps engineer in a big enterprise or in a smaller startup kind of company, first thing that you should uh, think about yourself is which mode do you prefer? Do you want somebody, your senior supervisor, to tell you, okay, these are the tasks or 5 problems that you need to solve. Or you are somebody who wants to, no, I'll figure out the problems, what problems are there, and I can figure out those problems, and I can
Yeah.
work by myself and fix them. So if you are that second kind of person, then startup is a very good place for you. But if you are looking for some inputs at every different stage, like, okay, now, okay, I'm done with this problem, what next? Sorry, I mean, invariably, when you join a startup, you may not even be working under a DevOps manager. You might be working
Yeah.
under dev manager or QA manager. Who himself is very busy with the responsibilities of that particular role or that particular team. And he may not have very valuable inputs for DevOps. He may just look at the saying, okay, this is my problem, just go and solve it somehow. So in that case, what it helps is if you are a self-driven person, you like to figure out problems by yourself, and you you will be able to go and talk to the engineering team, understand their pain points, and provide solutions to them. Then startup is the place for you. The big enterprise advantage is, of course, so usually somebody else will be there to lay out the problem statement for you. You have to go and fix that problem. Second advantage is may have a bigger DevOps team, so you have a lot of other brains to pick from and like figure out how to solve that particular problem that you are working on. So that way you may have a lot of help available to you, which kind of makes your role a bit easier compared to startups. But if you want to really grow as a person, grow in your career, I would highly advise everyone to at least work for a couple of years in a startup mode, and that too at the very initial level, not like when the team is established. If you get to be the first person of that team, that you want to go and start the DevOps team for any company, I mean, you should. I mean, if you have that kind of personality, you should jump on that opportunity and explore. I'm sure you're going to enjoy that ride.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have also been in situations where I had the keys to the server room and I knew
Right.
exactly what server is running what. We might appear a little old in this conversation, but
I think I remember where it was, right? I mean, I think we were together at that place.
yes. We set up the
Yeah.
server. Yeah. That's where I was taught the fine art of cabling servers by some great men.
So it's all fun, right? I mean, at that point
Oh,
you
yeah, really.
may not have liked it, or you may have
Correct.
dreaded that responsibility. But today, when you look back, you feel like, oh, we really did something at that point as well.
No, these are great stories. I'll tell you a real example. About 5 or 6 years back, I was invited to Moody's at World Trade Center on the 108th floor or something, and I was supposed to do a presentation to the Moody's IT team.
Wow.
Right now,
Okay.
you're walking in New York World Trade Center, 100 and something floor, and I'm addressing Moody's, which is the top of the top.
Yep.
Right? How the heck do you start that presentation?
Right.
Right? I need that opener, right?
Yep.
So my opener was, guys, I understand technology. I have been in server rooms. At one point, I used to be very good at cabling, and I have chilled beers in the server room and had them. So I know what you feel.
I hope you also talked about the midnight pages calls that you got.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. But that gave a very good opening, and then people open up and say, yeah, hamara banda hai. You can understand our shit.
It immediately builds the affection towards you, right?
Oh, absolutely. When your credibility goes through the roof. Beer always does it. Always. Across the world.
Oh, I thought cabling did it.
No, that and cabling. It's a lethal combination.
Nice.
Okay, I have to bring the conversation back.
Absolutely. I was
So
about to
tell me
forget
this.
what we were talking about.
Yeah, yeah, let's bring it back. So tell me this, you've been hiring DevOps people for a couple of years now, right? You've been expanding teams at various organizations. What are some of the observations you have when you interview people with 2, 3, 5 years experience? Because that lot is very different these days, right? So
Absolutely.
if somebody's in that experience range, what advice would you have for them so that they can really scale up their career?
So, first of all, so all of this, like the experience bracket that you mentioned, right, around 2 years to 5 years, kind of. So, all of those guys, they are very young, energetic. A lot. I mean, obviously, by you know by the number of years of experience. So they are very energetic and very confident as well. The only real thing, or only one thing that I kind of struggle to find is, so what I mean, I'm strictly talking about the DevOps teams here, okay, not the like DevOps people as such. So
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's the function of the workplace where they're working, but a lot of these guys, they seem to be dependent more on tools. Like, how do you do this? Oh, I go to this tool, click on this button, or here the forms will come up and I'll submit the information and that kind of stuff. And that way he or she is very confident. Okay, I understand the process. I know. I mean, that's the build, right? So I did a build. But what exactly is happening behind the scene? So have you tried to figure out? Like, I mean, I'm not making this up, but I have had candidates where they didn't know whether they're building a Java product behind the scene or the .NET product or any other thing, because they're so
Oh,
dependent on
wow.
the just the build a job. Oh, I built the job.
Right.
This was a deploy job. I ran deployment and it deployed to the server. What exactly happened? They didn't know. So that is the most kind of troublesome point at which I see. What happens because of that is that their job is done, like for that moment. Like, customer is happy, everybody is happy, they got their salary and everything, but they haven't learned anything. So they are not developing their careers. Forget about careers, they are not even developing their own technical strengths. They don't even know what do they like and what they don't, or they understand and they don't. And because of that, what is happening tomorrow? Okay, you are expert on Jenkins. You come to my company, I use GitHub Actions, and you're kind of out. I mean, you have no clue how to handle that. Whereas you might be doing exactly the same thing behind the scene what you were doing in earlier company. So that has been my very frustrating observation with many of the people. So they just kind of, I mean, some of that, I mean, I feel that curiosity is missing. What is happening behind the scenes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Somehow we seem to be happy getting our day-to-day job done and kind of pack our bags and enjoy the life mode. So my
Yeah. Yeah.
a suggestion to everybody in that range would be, like, go as deep as possible in any given problem that you're working on. I mean, that's the only place where you will learn. You will not learn over YouTube video or any Udemy course or anything, especially DevOps, because there is no DevOps course defined to explain. Okay, if this is the problem, how do you solve it?
Correct.
Because why did that problem show up? Because something else messed up, and you are never going to be able to figure that out. So the only way to do that is make your hands dirty, and as dirty as possible, and wash it off that problem, and then make it dirty again in some other problem, and that's how you
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah.
So that's my only suggestion to all of those young breeds, that only then you are going to be a real DevOps expert that the industry is looking to hire.
Yeah. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I had heard in a webinar some time back that somebody said, don't just say the words, make your hands dirty. They say, in the right time, make your hands so much dirty and in so much dirt that 10 years later, you can look at the dirt and you can figure out what had happened.
I just hold up a point that I think I can expand a bit more on. Why is it necessary, right? So, apart from your technical career growth and everything, with new advancement in technologies, with so many different tools and everything coming in, the problems are also going to be very complex now because they are going to be tool-based problems. And at the end of or at the root of every such problem, there will be some fundamental issue at the root level, which you will only be able to figure out if you have developed the debugging skills. And debugging skills will come from that the point that you mentioned, making your hands dirty. And that's why I would advise any and everyone to please go and debug, and YouTube is not going to solve your problem. You have to actually go into that problem and solve that problem and then figure out and learn is what I'm trying to say.
Sure. That makes sense. That makes complete sense. So let's talk a little bit about another angle of DevOps. We've spoken a lot about technology, technical things. Right now, as one progresses in the DevOps area and you start leading teams and then you start having a bigger impact in the organization across your team, across your silo, you start creating frameworks, structures which are to be used across the organization. Right? How important is it to develop interpersonal skills? Because you're talking about putting something forth which will be used by other people. Your pipelines, you're not using them. You're the maintainers of the pipelines, but the developers are using them. So how important is it for a DevOps person as they grow senior and as they grow in their ladder? How important is it to them to work on their softer skills? Convincing skills, communication skills, presentation skills. How important is that?
Sure. I mean, they are absolutely important, no doubt about it, because you're interacting with like your peers, your superiors, and like from superiors from different teams as well, wherein you may not be interacting with them on daily basis, but you may be interacting with them in the context of some specific problem, where you are trying to suggest a solution and they are going to like agree or disagree to your solution that you suggest, right? But all of that, to my mind, all of that again depends on your technical strength, on what have you done in that place, like wherever you are working, right? Whatever time you have spent so far, how technically capable you have been and to solve the problems. Once you have done that, you build a brand for yourself in that sense. Maybe a brand is a big word, but like you make a name, right? Like, okay, he can solve problems. Now, if I'm some senior person in the company and you're coming and telling me some solution, I know that you have fixed some like many other problems for many other teams. I rather listen to you carefully and take your suggestion accordingly. But whereas if the fundamental stuff itself is missing, right? I mean, there's only so much that you can carry along with your software skills and your convincing power.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I mean, it can be misleading also if you are not very convinced or confident of the solution that you're proposing, but you're trying to convince the other team, right?
Cover it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's even messier stuff for the organization as a whole. So now, but on the other side of that situation is, okay, you are very good technically and everything, but if you haven't developed your software skills, at least to a certain extent, you will not be able to communicate your solutions properly. And one simple thing is, it's very, when you are working with different teams, right? It's very easy to hurt somebody else's ego.
Yeah.
Especially that happens a lot between dev engineering team, DevOps team, or IT team, right? Where the job functions itself are different. And this is a real problem that we have seen. I'm sure you will also agree. So in that case, those software skills will come in handy to communicate and reach on amicable solutions which works well as a whole for organization. And that's where those skills will definitely help, and one certainly needs to work on them.
Sure. So I think what you're saying is you're actually sort of building a pyramid. What you're saying is the base, of course, is core technical strength.
Yep.
And without that, you can't build anything on top of it. That has to be rock solid.
Yep.
Right? Now, as you grow in career and as your sphere of influence expands, you pick up other skills along the way, which will help you communicate this core strength that you have. Right? And the way I have personally seen that people develop is not necessarily everybody is a great orator. Not necessarily everybody can create a beautiful looking presentation and present it to 100 people. Right. Not everybody is like that. But like you said, if you can develop enough communication skills to stand in front of those 10 people and draw a flowchart on the board, which is very technical, that itself will also work.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
Technical, you're communicating, you're talking to techies, and you're basing it off real experience. So just whiteboarding itself is good enough. But
Absolutely.
it needs that communication skill. I think that's what you're also trying to say.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, I'm a little conscious of time. We are already at 45 minutes. We can go on for another 2 hours, but let's try and wrap this up.
So you want to crash internet today itself, huh?
Yeah. Why not? So, Kamlesh, you spent close to 2 decades in this area. You and me were together doing DevOpsy stuff when it was not even called DevOps. We didn't even know we were doing DevOps.
Do you even remember our titles back then? We were development tool support.
Yeah, correct. Tool support. Yeah.
Yep. Right.
Yeah. I know. Correct. So, having spent all of this time, right? Any regrets? And the second question, what would you do different if you had to do it all over again?
Regrets. Okay, you just mentioned we have 2 hours at least, right? So
Minimum 2 hours. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the good leeway to have. But seriously, no, I don't think. I mean, I don't think any regrets as such. I mean, to be honest, I'm quite happy the way my career has shaped. I've been lucky on multiple occasions, done some good stuff, enjoyed a lot, and so good learning and everything. So no regrets as such. I mean, if at all, maybe I should have written some proper application code at some point of time, like just be a kind of devil's advocate and become a developer and interact with DevOps team. But apart from that, no regret as such.
Yeah, but you don't get everything in life, right? So yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Anyways, I have very low expectations, so I'm okay. It's all about managing expectations, right? So
Yeah, absolutely, man. I agree. All right. So, Kamlesh, I think we had a fun conversation. You've laid out some very, very important points, which I think will help the people who are viewing this. And thank you so much for doing this. And hopefully, in another time and day, we can do it again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Savinder. Yeah, it was very nice talking to you in this mode. I mean, we have so kind of strange, but yeah, I mean, I'm happy that I could pull it off. So I could survive those that hour. So, but it's all thanks to you. So thank you so much for having me on your show, and all the very best to you.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Yep.
Bye.
Yes, bye. Thanks.